Good morning, everyone. Happy Tuesday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. All right. Pardon me. We are continuing our examination of the Olivet Discourse. Now, yesterday I reminded us of how important it is to see that the parable of the coming of the Lord for the wedding is based on the Old Testament, and how the futurist eschatologies, particularly the amillennial and the postmillennial world, are in deep, deep trouble on the doctrine of the wedding and the fulfillment of the Old Covenant. Because, folks, this is really, really important. And I touched on the idea of the fulfillment of Israel's feast days, and many of you have asked me, am I ever going to get finished with my book on the feast days? I'm getting closer. Okay, I'm working on it. I'm researching on it, and so, I wish I could set a firm date for its completion, but unfortunately I just can't, because the more I research, the more I study, and the more I go, oh, holy cow, I gotta have this in there. This is incredible, and it just reminds me. It reminds me of how important it is to know the Old Testament source of the New Testament eschatology. And it reminds me how tragic it is that both the amillennial and the postmillennial views all but ignore this concept. If they don't ignore it, they completely abuse it and they distort it. Okay, so the concept and the doctrine of the wedding, the coming of the Lord for the wedding, is, as we have established, an Old Testament doctrine. God promised to remarry Israel under a new covenant in Hosea, Isaiah, Jeremiah. And so, if we do not allow for that reality in our interpretation of the New Testament, we're going to miss the fact that the New Testament writers all tell us, and they tell us repeatedly, and they tell us explicitly, that their eschatology was the anticipation of the yet future, although imminent to them, fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises. And the consistency of the New Testament teaching, the consistency of the New Testament narrative when it comes to the wedding is absolutely remarkable. So what I want to do this morning is to share with you a little bit from Revelation chapter 18 and 19 that drives home this point about when the wedding was to take place and the framework of when it was to take place. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to share with you one of the massive, massive problems that is to be found in the amillennial and the postmillennial world in regard to the wedding. I mean, it's absolutely huge. And I would also say this, it's fatal, pardon me, to the futurist views. So you don't want to miss that. Okay. In Revelation chapter 18, what do we find? Well, as a lead-in, in chapter 17, John said he saw the great harlot, Babylon. Now, I'm spending time in my Now TV series establishing the identity of Babylon, and I did that, when we went through Revelation chapter 11 here on Morning Musings as well. But Revelation chapter 17, John said he saw this great harlot, having in her hand a golden cup full of the blood of the martyrs and of the saints of Jesus Christ. That cup was full of the blood. Now, biblically, any time one of God's cups is full, and you see, Biblically, God has four cups. God has a measuring cup of sin on the part of sinners, a measuring cup on the part of the righteous and their suffering, a cup of wrath that would be poured out when the cup of sin was full and when the cup of suffering was full. The cup of wrath would be poured out. And then the cup of blessing. The cup of blessing would be poured out on the righteous when God vindicated their suffering and saved them and provided the salvation for all of those who followed him. Now, so what we have in Revelation chapter 17 is this harlot city who is holding a cup full. Now, we've already just seen in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 15 and 18, the vials, the cups, if you please, containing the wrath of God. The seventh vial would be poured out, and by the way, these vials contain, again, the wrath of God. And that seventh vial would be poured out on the city Babylon. Chapter 17 gives us the reason why. Because her cup of sin is full. And so in Revelation chapter 17, we see the reason for the impending destruction of this city. In Revelation 18, John, along with the people of the land, marvel at the impending destruction of this great city. Now, of course, many people believe, well, it's got to be Rome. Got to be Rome. I'm sorry. Rome is not Babylon. You can't make it fit. Well, you can make it fit by twisting, turning, distorting the text, but not by honoring the text. So in Revelation chapter 18, in the description of this great city, and by the way, let me interject here. In my book, Who is This Babylon? I have an in-depth discussion of Revelation 18 and all of the language that is used there to demonstrate that historically, biblically, the Jews described Babylon or Jerusalem that way, and even pagans described Jerusalem in the way that Revelation 18 describes Babylon. So it simply cannot be said that Jerusalem doesn't fit the description of Revelation chapter 18. That is absolutely unbiblical, it's untrue, it's unhistorical. Then, in chapter 19, at the coming of the Lord, what do we find? Well, now, by the way, let's keep in mind that the reason for the judgment of this city, this great harlot city, is because, number one, remember chapter 17:6, her cup of sin is full. Well, her cup, pardon me, her cup of sin contains the blood of the martyrs. Well, in chapter 18, 20, and 24, it's even more specific. It contains the blood of the apostles and the prophets. Now, at this interjection, or at this point, we need to interject this thought. Jesus in Matthew 23, Jesus in Luke 11, 49 and following, Jesus in Luke 13, 28 and following, accused Old Covenant Jerusalem of being the city guilty, number one, of killing the prophets. Well, in Revelation 16:6, it is Babylon that killed the prophets. Revelation 11 depicts for us this great city is, quote, where the Lord was crucified. I don't have to tell you where Jesus was crucified. You know where it was. And it wasn't in literal Babylon, in literal Iraq, and it was not in Rome. It was at Jerusalem. And, pardon me, Jesus said, "Behold, I send to you apostles and prophets. Some of them you shall scourge, crucify, and chase from city to city, that upon you may come all of the blood of all the righteous." That's a conflation of Matthew 23, 33 following, and Luke chapter 11, 49 and following. So who is it that Jesus accused of being guilty of the blood of the apostles and prophets? It was not literal Babylon. It was not Rome. It was no other city than Old Covenant Jerusalem. Her cup was full of the blood of the martyrs. Now, very quickly, John said, "After these things I heard a loud voice of a great multitude in heaven saying, Alleluia! Salvation and glory and honor and power belong to the Lord our God. For true and righteous are his judgments, because he has judged the great harlot who corrupted the earth with her fornication. He has avenged on her the blood of the servants shed by her." What city was guilty of killing the apostles and prophets? Old Covenant Jerusalem. At the coming of the Lord described in Revelation chapter 19, the Lord out of heaven riding on a white horse, a sword coming out of his mouth, a name written on his thigh, the name being the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And it is at that coming that the blood of the martyrs is avenged. Now, hang on to this, because on Thursday, I'm going to correlate Revelation 19 with the Old Covenant promise of the fulfillment of God's Old Covenant promises in Israel's last days. And what that will prove is that the wedding, which we're about to talk about here momentarily, that the wedding would be in Israel's last days. Now, very quickly, true and righteous are his judgment, because he has judged the great harlot who corrupted the earth with her fornication. He has avenged on her the blood of his servants shed by her. Now, I'm going to skip down to verse 7. Let us be glad and rejoice. Give him glory. Give him who? The Lord. The Lord who's done what? Who is avenging the blood of the martyrs. For, here's the reason for the rejoicing. For the marriage of the Lamb has come, and his wife has made herself ready. Now listen to me, folks, very carefully. Catch the power of this. If you place the wedding at Pentecost, you're wrong. I say that as kindly as possible. If you place the wedding at some point of time in the future, then you're placing the destruction of Babylon, the city that killed the prophets, that killed Jesus, and that killed the apostles and prophets, in the future. So that means you've got to find some city off in our future that killed the Old Testament prophets, that is where the Lord was slain, and that was guilty of killing the apostles and prophets of Jesus. Well, I'm sorry, folks. There are no apostles of Jesus in the future. There are no prophets of Jesus in the future. And that means the coming of the Lord for the wedding was at the destruction of the city, killed the prophets, is where the Lord was slain, that killed the apostles and prophets. That means that Matthew 25, 1 to 13, the coming of the Lord for the wedding, was at the destruction of Old Covenant Jerusalem. that destroys any and all attempts to divide the Olivet Discourse into two subjects. It means the Olivet Discourse is about one subject: the end of the Old Covenant age of Israel, the destruction of the harlot bride, the harlot wife, and the marriage of the New Covenant bride. Not at the end of the New Covenant, at the end of the Old. Hey, look, I'm out of time, but hey, don't forget, April 2012, fantastic 2-book special, Essays on Eschatology by my friend Sam Dawson, and The Resurrection of Daniel, chapter 12 and verse 2, Future or Fulfilled. Normally it would cost you $57.80. For April 2021, your total delivered price, U.S. orders only, $37.50. Going to save $20. There's a wonderful banner right at the top of my webpage, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Go there, take advantage of this wonderful offer, save yourself $20, and get yourself some fantastic material. Hey, I'll see you on the flip side.